Hey guys, it's Mountain Walk, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about Urza's Saga. That's right, we're going to talk about Urza's Saga and how freaking sweet and crazy and important it was. I mean, it's hard to even really put into words, but I'm going to do my best. So we're going to take a look at Saga. We're going to take a look at everything that's going on around this time period and see if we can really get a better understanding of what things really look like when they go to shit. Um, Things definitely went to shit. I mean, not only in the actual game itself, but everything's going crazy in the story, and things things aren't looking so good. So what happens after the Silix blast destroys basically all of Argoth and pretty much wrecks everything, causes the Ice Age, puts a giant undersea trench to where Argoth used to be, um, and it created the Shard of the 12 Worlds. This basically locked pretty much anyone out of the Shard. And then after it was broken in Ice Age by Freyalise, Urza is able to come back and he starts on his experiments. So he has the Bloodline Project, the time travel experiments in Teleria, as well as creating Karn for those aforementioned time travel experiments. Apparently, silver was a metal that was able to be used to pass through the time machine basically without being destroyed or corrupted. And then, of course, Sarah's realm, where Urza rests after escaping from Phyrexia, attempting to destroy Phyrexia head on, did not go so well. So he ends up recuperating in Sarah's realm for a long time, but the realm itself becomes corrupted, invaded by Phyrexians, and Urza collapses the plane to power the Weatherlight. So lots of really crazy stuff going on. He also starts making the Legacy, and the Legacy is basically his grand plan, for destroying Yawgmoth and Phyrexia once and for all. And he does this with the Bloodline Project. He starts making the Metathran, which were basically genetically engineered soldiers that looked really super cool. He discovers the mana rig on Shiv, and starts working there. So pretty much all over the place. We're going to all these different places, looking at different things. Teleria gets destroyed once, twice. Fast time bubbles, slow time bubbles. Teferi's spark ignites actually when he gets trapped in a slow time bubble. Very unfortunate for him. And actually, they end up using these bubbles to their benefit for experiments that they're able to run in a fraction of the time. Of course, Carrick gets trapped in one of these bubbles as well, and then literally invades like the next minute, but it's been like, I don't know, years for them. So his sort of Phyrexian army pops out of nowhere. So lots of crazy stuff. And unfortunately, this has repercussions up to this current day and even the current paradigm, because the Silix Blast, the crazy time travel experiments and stuff, all of the massive, the shard itself, all these massive shifts of mana, warping the fabric of reality, cause time rifts. And what ends up happening is, of course, this caused all these time rifts to form, and planeswalkers had to sacrifice their sparks to seal them, and this caused the mending, so planeswalkers themselves became less, walking nukes, and more like just wizards, more or less, with the ability to travel between different planes of existence. So, yeah, lots of crazy stuff going on, and just very appropriately too. The game itself was going through some crazy stuff, but we'll get to that in just a minute. All right, so Urza's Saga, Urza's Legacy, and Urza's Destiny, probably one of the most famous sets, legendary really, um, one of the strongest sets. I mean, it's really only been rivaled by the original base set, Alpha, Beta, Unlimited, and that's probably not a good thing since ABU had insane amounts of very powerful cards, and they were supposed to be balanced out by, maybe you had a couple, like you had a Mox and your friend maybe had a Lotus, someone else had a Wheel of Fortune, someone had a Recall, like, it wasn't, your decks weren't really built around these things, they didn't have multiples of these effects, so it wasn't a big deal, right? They knew these cards were really powerful. For example, if you look at the original Boon cycle, the one with Ancestral Bolt, uh, Giant Growth, Dark Ritual, and Healing Salve, uh, obviously they're all common except for Ancestral Recall. I mean, that should give you a hint that they knew something's up, right? So back then, that was, beginning of the game. They didn't even know if this was even going to take off. Richard Garfield's just creating stuff, just having fun. But of course, they figured out that that didn't work. Those cards were really broken, and they need to be banned or restricted or whatever, wherever they were legal. So for Urza's Saga and Urza's block in general to really have a similar power level, I mean, it's that's saying something, right? And this is non-hyperbole, I'm not even going to be able to go through. I'm going to try and hit all the really, really good cards, but there's just so many. I mean, there's like obviously all the broken ones, but then there's a ton that even still see a lot of play to this day that are the foundations of decks. So yeah, there's a lot of really good stuff too. Especially a lot of that stuff gets missed pretty easily because of just all the insane stuff going on. But yeah, that's okay. That's why I'm here. We're gonna go through all that stuff. So hopefully you guys are relaxing. This is gonna take me a hot minute. I got a nice drink, got some caffeine. I'm gonna go and look through this sweet, sweet block. Mm-hmm. All right. Man, got some caffeine. I'm ready. I'm roaring to go. Um, Oddly enough, one of the funny things is that Urza's block was originally supposed to be an enchantment block, but obviously it's known for all of its busted artifacts. Um, but in actuality, all the all the artifact stuff is busted, and all the enchantment stuff is busted. Like, uh, if you go through a lot of this stuff, I mean, Saga block is actually a really good showcase of why they've had so much problem in the last two Theros sets with the enchantment theme just not really living up to what it could be, because enchantments are just so much more difficult to interact with. They're some of the most resilient style of permanents. Most colors can't even interact with them very well or profitably, and most of those are sideboard cards. So they have to do these stupid things with like creature enchantments and bestow, and the creatures are, yeah, just all this wonky stuff, and it's like people are expecting like Enchantress Madness or something like that, and then we're not getting it. Well, the reason we're not getting it is because of like the replenished decks that were good at this time, like the with Opalescence, Attunement to dump stuff into the yard, Frantic Search when it wasn't banned, and that create a really, really powerful uninteractive deck. Very difficult, very great mana. It was hard to disrupt. Or the Panda Burst decks, of course, those came a little bit later because that you needed the Sapling Burst from Mass Block. So, but even just the Opalescence, like spam enchantment stuff, is just really, really good, really powerful, and it's just obviously a lot better than we're not even talking about including like the fading enchantments, Parallax Wave, Parallax Nexus, and stuff. So yeah, a lot of the, I mean, and we're not even talking about bargain either, right? Like we don't even talk about like, oh yeah, obviously bargain was a mistake, but there's all these other things that were pretty ridiculous too, right? Replenish itself, obviously not an enchantment, but a busted enabler for enchantments. Like, and if for some reason they did draw their one tranquility, and they notice it's in their hand, and then they cast the tranquility, then you just like drop a replenish, and it's like, why do you even bother? Like, I, I went through the trouble of sideboarding for this fucking deck, and now I get super blown out and I have all this extra stuff in play. So yeah, that's an issue, and that's why I think these enchantment sort of blocks are just not going to work out very well. Maybe if they went a little bit harder on the enchantment creatures, less with the bestow stuff, which is just kind of dumb. Um, but maybe they could do like stuff with enchantment lands if they really wanted to push it, make it interesting. That would be probably pretty cool. But as you can see, there was a lot of problems with the enchantment stuff. It was pretty ridiculous, and so of course that's definitely probably caused some trepidation on their part. They're probably definitely a little uneasy about really pushing it too hard because, like I said, they can create these really uninteractive, powerful decks, very similar to like obviously like some of the Tinker decks, Wildfire decks, whatever that are, um, the powerful artifact decks that emerge at this time. Not even the broken ones, but just the good ones. So yeah, lots of broken artifacts, lots of broken enchantments. So, but that's okay. Today, these decks are pretty powerful. For example, the Replenish deck is really great and pre-modern, pretty strong. Obviously, Enchantress and pre-modern Enchantress. There's some interesting builds I've seen in Legacy. A lot of stuff you can do there. So I think it's certainly an interesting deck to play. I mean, obviously you can't Elk Argothian Enchantress, so that's automatically like amazing. And it actually got some interesting tools from the most recent Theros block. And actually the one before it, it had like the giant guy where like the enchantment comes into play and it gives stuff. It does the nausea effect, so everything gets -1/-1 on your opponent's side. That's pretty sweet. I don't know, but anyways, let's go on. But during this time, of course, Saga came out in, gosh, the 98, I believe. So this is like 3 years, or excuse me, 3 years, 5 years after the game just first started. So there's a lot of growing pains. Like MTG is modernizing around this time, but we still see a lot of really big issues, a lot of problems come back, and issues that, of course, that we see in the first sets, alpha, beta, and unlimited. So that's not very good. Also, um, as you can see, as I put there, the triple Saga draft was just the draft format in general was really heavily biased towards black. For example, you had like Corrupt at common, very famously Pestilence at common, stuff like Expunge, um, like just tons and tons of like really ridiculous stuff. Bone Shredder, um, Befoul, yeah, tons of stuff. And it was just the black was super deep, and like I mean, obviously something like Pestilence is not shouldn't be a common, right? Like this is like like common bolts and common disintegrates and fireballs and like beta or whatever. So that's not very good. So yeah, the draft form was famously unbalanced. Um, Man, that was just crazy. Uh, Also, during this time, of course, we did get some pretty interesting um, mechanics, some good ones. Some the ones I'm not gonna really talk about. Some of the sleeping stuff is actually pretty good, like Hidden Gibbons, of course. That's a really powerful one. It's a 1 mana green enchantment, and when your opponent plays an instant, it becomes a 4/4 ape. I mean, we're talking about Return to Monkey levels of good stuff. So yeah, let's do that. So yeah, a lot of the hidden ones are pretty good, really powerful, like really undercosted. Obviously, they just need to you just need to meet the condition like your opponent does X, Y, Z. But Hidden Gibbons is probably the best one. Very good card, very powerful card. And there's also like some of the sleeping stuff, and then some of the stuff with like first counters, and that stuff's okay. It's cool. It's interesting, but it's not really that great. Um, oh, and of course, as we were talking about the story's sort of a prequel, at least like the sets as the sets were released in chronologically. This comes after it's after Tempest Block, but this story takes place more or less around the time of like after Ice Age, and then also before Argoth is despoiled. So yeah. Oh, and also in case I didn't mention it, this nearly killed the game, like literally. This is the most uh, tumultuous time, really, even compared to today. In some respects, it's obviously way worse, um, but in other ways, all you had to do was rip off the Band-Aid, and everything was more or less okay. Um, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So yeah, so let's get started. All right. So yeah, like I was saying, it wasn't very good. It didn't work out. Um, there was a lot of problems. First and foremost, like immediately as Saga was released, there was a ton of different enablers and busted cards in 5th edition as well as in Tempest Block, and this really caused a lot of issues. I mean, think about it. Ancient Tomb, Lotus Petal, as well as City Traders, different like graveyard shenanigans like Recurring Nightmare, Survival of the Fittest, Dream Halls, again, more graveyard shenanigans stuff, and also make stuff free. Mind over Matter, again, comboed very well with our good friend Tolarian Academy. So, yeah, it was bad. It was really, really bad. Like, we're talking like turn one, turn two kills, not even unheard of, being more common than they should have been. Um, way too much acceleration, way too many enablers, too many good payoffs. I mean, yeah, it was it was insane in a word. So yeah, so also um, again, as you can see, this is from Morrow's article. More of the more of the mistakes. There were some other things in the article too. A lot of it was like Homelands was too weak, card art was confusing and like contrary to what the card did, like Whippoorwill or whatever. But of course, these ones are specifically about Saga Block. So again, the free spell mechanic that comes into play on tap lands one, again, pretty broken. Most overpowered card, Yawgmoth's Will. I mean, yeah, it's this or Academy is probably the most busted card in the set, probably in the entire block, and then pretty close to probably in the entire game, depending on how you want to rate like Moxes and Lotus and stuff. But it's easily in the top 10. Like, Yawgmoth's Will just put in anything, and it just does way too much. Are you trying to combo? Obviously, it's the best card in your deck. Are you just trying to do random stuff? Great, also the best card in your deck. Like, it didn't really matter. You didn't have to like do anything other than play black mana sources in your deck, which is not that hard, by the way. So he mentions regrowth or whatever. Yeah, regrowth being a green and colorless gets you one card. This is for an extra colorless, so you get your entire graveyard. Pretty interesting. And then, of course, which we'll talk a little bit about later, about fixing cards with all this extra text on them to make them simpler, more elegant, cleaner. Tinker is certainly that. Again, another completely insane card. Like, this thing, I mean, every artifact block has just offered something even more busted. I mean, the current new thing to tinker out, in Vintage at least, is, well, it's only where you can really play it, is Bolus's Citadel. Basically, think about if you could tinker out your future sight, it's that kind of thing, except it's, you can pay a bunch of life and cast stuff for free, so you get lots of stuff going on, lots of really, really bad stuff. Yeah. That's right, and now we're going to talk about, of course, perhaps the most famous deck from this time, Turbo Genius. That's right, we're talking about Tolarian Academy, Mind Over Matter shenanigans. This deck was infamous when I first started playing Magic. This was like the big thing, Academy decks. Everyone always talked about them, like how busted they were, this and that and the other. I mean, it was just crazy. Like seeing all the stuff that they could do and just like listening to these stories and stuff. I'm like, I don't believe it. How is that possible? Yeah, it's crazy. I couldn't figure out combo decks, when I first started. I'm like, how does this even work? How do you kill someone on the first turn? That's insane. So, yeah, we'll take a good look at our good friend Turbo Genius. All right. So, as you can see, this deck is like mana and card draw, and that's pretty much it, with the exception of Mind Over Matter. But I guess that basically produces mana too with an Academy. So, yeah. Obviously, with all this 0 mana ramp, you go totally insane on the first turn. You can kill on turn 1. Just play like Academy. Start ramping out like crazy. Going nuts. And then refill with Windfall or Time Spiral. Or even just a moderately sized Stroke of Genius. Intuition, of course, is great here because it gets your Academies. Ancient Tomb lets you speed you up a turn, so it lets you turn 2 Intuition or whatever to get your Academies. Turn 3 go off. Real good stuff. Really powerful. This is basically this is a standard deck that was probably better than most vintage decks at the time, or at least up to par. Pretty crazy. It seems insane, but it's actually true. So yeah, like a typical turn, be like say first turn kill, you be like Academy, play like Diamond, Petal, tap Diamond for like Mana Vault into Key, into untap it, and then tap your Academy for 3, and then use the rest of your mana for Time Spiral, then Time Spiral to a bunch of mana, play a bunch of crap, tap Academy for a bajillion mana, play your Mind Over Matter, and then like as long as you have another draw effect, it's more or less academic. It's academic to combo out at that point. So yeah, and that's just a turn 1 kill. I mean, the turn 2 and 3 is even easier, obviously, because then it's easier to build up for your Academy, and more deterministic, at least in that point. So pretty crazy. And this was even worse because it's under the old Legend rules where like if you went first and you got your Academy out, your opponent couldn't play their Academy out, and yeah, that was real bad. It was times like these what that really spurred Wizards to reconsider how the Legend rule works, and same thing with Lin Civi in Mass Block. So yeah, but that wasn't even. I don't know which is worse, but that wasn't even the only insane deck. Then we got Jar, right? The broken Jar deck. I mean, literally, it was called Broken Jar deck. I think that's I've heard it referred to that a few times. But this thing again, piles of mana. This is after, of course, because this came out in Legacy, so it's already after the banning of like Academy. But you still had all this other shit legal, and it's just like, why? And keep in mind, Necropotence is in 5th edition for some reason. I'm not really sure why. Yeah, this is again another standard deck. Yeah, so what you do, chain a bunch of jars together, then play a Megrum, and then your opponent discards a bunch of cards and dies. Yep, that's pretty much it. You just chain jars and get a Megrum out, and then yeah. So that's pretty much it. It's pretty stupid. This was, of course, one of the emergency bannings, although there seems to be a little bit of uncertainty whether it was quote unquote emergency banned or they just forgot to add it to the list or whatnot. But it doesn't really matter. This deck was insane. I mean, like all these cards are just ridiculous. Like which one's not broken? Yes, Swamp, or Underground River, or City of Brass. I mean, that's about all I can think of. Everything else is just. Oh, I guess Megrim itself isn't broken. That's just like a card. Yeah, yeah, I guess Megrim. Of course, obviously, it's a synergy kind of thing, so with Memory Jar, it's obviously very good, but yeah, I mean, I don't. There's not a lot to say. This deck was played in one Pro Tour. I think it was in '99. Um, but it was all again still during Combo Winter. There's a lot of stuff. I think it was yeah top eight it with like Randy Bueller and Eric Lohr, but they didn't win. I think it was Kai Bude, Kai Bude. Yes, that's right, Kai Bude, and it was GP Vienna 1999. And what do we have? This, of course, is an extended tournament, so the jar decks looked a little different, a little bit different. I think they were able to add like Vampiric Tutor and stuff. But what we have here is, well, this is very, very similar to the High Tide decks we actually have today in Legacy. The only difference is they don't really play Thawing Glaciers, although it's pretty good here with, well, just fetching out your lands. So that's pretty nice. And then also, like with Turnabout, you can fetch multiple lands, which is pretty nice. And again, it fetches like out a mountain, which is pretty nice too. So you can, Pyroblast stuff. Because this deck just really wants to play Drago. That's really all it wants to do. Um, so it's perfectly fine killing on turn 4. This deck can kill on turn 3, but obviously the chance of fizzling is a lot higher. So if you've never played High Tide before, what it does is it basically plays a bunch of basic islands for as many turns as it can. It'll just counterspell stuff just for value. Like it'll just like even if it's not a huge threat and won't kill them, all it wants to do is just use it as like a just like a tempo tool. So it's not really looking to lock you out of the game or whatever. It just plays like a tempo sort of game plan. It's called like false tempo. So you'll be able to just counter their random dude, and then turn 3 counter another random dude. And then you just like impulse and draw cards or whatever, tutor form with Mystical or Merchant Scroll. And then once you get to 4 or 5 lands, you can go off pretty easily, especially if you have multiple High Tides. Then your lands produce a bunch of mana, and then Palinchron lets you go infinite, and then you can Mystical for your Mystical or Merchant Scroll for your Stroke of Genius, and you can stroke yourself to draw infinite cards, make infinite mana basically, and then have well, I guess you at that point, if you're drawing infinite cards, you don't really, they're probably not going to be able to disrupt you. Anyways, so you just draw a bunch. Merchant Scroll, sorry. Frantic Search, untap your lands, of course, as does Palinchron. Turnabout, again, another untapper. These are all very sweet cards. Yeah, and basically just plays like a combo control role. This deck is pretty ridiculous, and beating out the other decks just because just being able to like just deal with all this stuff, force your turn 1 whatever, then into counterspell, into into an Arcane Denial or whatever, and then killing them on turn 4. It's pretty good, pretty good. So yeah, you didn't really care too much about what they got. Just Arcane Denial cantripping was pretty nice. So yeah, but obviously against other decks with a lot of disruption, Arcane Denial is not the best because then they draw into it at a greater rate. But yeah, this deck was pretty silly. Definitely one of this is one that basically the highlight, I guess, almost of Combo Winter. I don't know. Everything, all of the standard and extended decks looked very similar, except in extended you got 2 lands and some extra cards. It was, oh, I guess you got Demonic Consultation too. I guess that's something. Yeah. This deck was a little miserable to sit through, but if they at least they could, if they had a Palinchron, they could go infinite and more or less make it deterministic if they had like a stroke of genius, so that's not too bad. But yeah, anyways. All right, so let's start off with all these bannings. We got a bunch of them. Oh boy, we got a bunch of them. So in standard, in December, Academy and Windfall are banned, more or less breaking the Academy deck. So that doesn't really function anymore. Extended, same thing. And then Legacy and Vintage, they're restricted and banned. But also Stroke of Genius 2, because Burning Geyser was already restricted, and so the X spells are just seen as ridiculous because you have all this extra free mana with Moxa and Lotus and Soul Ring and stuff, so they were a lot more powerful back in the day. Oh, excuse me, back in the day. So yeah, those are summarily dealt with. Okay, we have some more bannings in March. So in standard, Dreamhall's Earthcraft, Fluctuator, Lotus Bell, Recurring Nightmare, Time Spiral, and then of course Memory Jar later is banned. The only thing here that's weird is Fluctuator. That probably didn't really need to be banned, but people were really sick of combo decks at this point. Yeah, the Recurring Nightmare was because of all of the free spells, like Great Whale with Recurring Nightmare was like infinite mana. So that was another ridiculous one. Obviously, Petal just being more free, cheap, ridiculous mana. Dream Halls is another combo enabler at the time when you have basically infinite mana and you have mana vaults and Mox Diamond and Ancient Tombs and all sorts of other crap to ramp this out. Is just dumb. Just dumb. Time Spiral also banned, basically free, just too good with all your mana ramp. Earthcraft was, I'm trying to think, I guess there is a way to get infinite mana. Obviously this is before Squirrel Nest. I think maybe that one didn't need to be banned, but again, like I said, regardless, like you don't really want any combo decks, regardless of how good they are, left, right, after all this crap. It's just too much. Jar is banned also in Extended, and then Block you have, again, Spiral Jar, Windfall banned. Vintage, again, Jar is restricted, Time Spiral is restricted. And then Jar and Time Spiral are banned in Legacy, which I should say is 1-5 back then. And then in Standard, Mind Over Matter is banned. Also in Extended, Time Spiral is banned. And then in Constructed, Cradle Sanctum, Academy, and Voltaic Key are banned. And then on August 1st, Bargain is banned. Oh boy. And then there's a bunch of errata. Lion's Eye Diamond receives errata at this time, specifically because it used to be able to basically let you cast spells under a different ruling. Obviously, that's not what they wanted to do to create another Black Lotus, so that got errated. So a lot of wonky stuff happening. So that's basically it. Come on, that's basically it. There's no more bannings. I mean, there couldn't be. Like that's like 2 pages worth of bannings, right? That's that's basically it. Okay, so there's actually more. Okay, so we have extended. We have Dream Hall's Earthcraft, Lotus Petal, Mind Over Matter, and Yawgmoth's Will are banned. And then also some chaff comes off in Vintage, obviously, because it's not played. And then, of course, this is a huge amounts of restrictions in Vintage. Like, they go nuts. They're like, we're done. Just fuck all this stuff. So, Crop Rotation, Doomsday, Dream Halls, Enlightened Tutor, whatever, you can read, right? And they unban some random garbage in Legacy, and then obviously ban stuff and restrict little things in Vintage. This is just ridiculous. This is crazy, because I don't think they've, since then, they've never had to ban this many things in Vintage, or excuse me, restrict. 2007 or 8, when they I think they hit like 5 cards, like they hit all the cantrips and gush and stuff like that. Um, that was the closest, but that was like 4 or 5 cards. So that's obviously a big difference. And that was like a seismic shift. And I think a lot, in some respects, it did kill a lot of the interest in vintage, but also a lot of the interest in vintage was killed because of just the rising prices at this time. And then only a couple years later, the rising prices in Legacy started to price people out too. So yeah, that's definitely a big deal. So yeah, I'm pretty sure there's no more bannings, okay? None. Whew, wow. Oh, I am scared. No more bannings. I'm scared of bannings. I think I have PTSD from bannings. Just reading all those. And then currently, of course, we just keep getting cards banned every day. Thankfully, it's a little bit different. Um, you know, it's like, yeah, okay, these cards are obviously Tolarian Academy is not a fair card. Like, at least it makes sense. But now it's like, I don't even know what the hell is going on today. But that's a video for a different time. Let's take a breather. Let's relax a little bit. Back to relax mode. Let's look at all the cool stuff from Saga Block. And so we got our first mechanic up here. We got cycling. That's right, cycling. All right. Here's some of the more prominent cards. A lot of other things like cycling lands and stuff like that saw some play a little bit here and there, but these are some really big ones. Cloud of Fairies, just being obviously you can cycle it, but just coming to play obviously as free spells, great. Miscalculation, they're actually thinking, I think they said they were going to reprint this in like Amonkhet block, but they printed Censor instead, so like, it's probably too strong. So yeah, obviously Censor's pretty good. I mean, relatively speaking, of course. It's a cycling force spike for 2 mana. Ugh. But it's okay, you know. Miscalc obviously would have been much better, much more powerful. So I guess, you know, maybe it's okay that it's not there. Whatever. Wild Dogs, again, this is a nice part, nice addition to the Stompy deck. Pretty great, pretty great. Rapid Decay, again, this is a really good graveyard hoser, especially since obviously, yeah, you can cycle it for free. And it's instant speed, so this was pretty nice against a lot of the reanimator decks that would pop up a year or two later. And of course, Unearth, recently reprinted last year in Modern Horizons. This is definitely a sweet card I play with a lot. This thing is great. Definitely, its reanimation helps cheat stuff into play. I've gotten back quite a few Hypnotic Specters with this guy, and that felt real good. So yeah, big fan of Unearth, and of course if it's dead, it cycles. So these sort of utility cards with cycling are really great, really sweet, and especially something like Wild Dogs. It's great because if you obviously if they have more life than you can just cycle it away instead of it just sitting dead in your hand like a Gazban Ogre would. So lots of cool stuff here. All right. And now we have even more mechanics. We got Echo. So this was basically one where you just had to pay its casting cost. Now it's like Echo cost, so the Echo cost can be different because they changed that in Time Spiral block. But originally it was just your mana cost, just paying that again. So yeah, so Urza's Blueprint. This one was a good Tinker card because it lets you just draw cards basically for free for no mana, which was pretty sweet. And of course, Raven Familiar. This was a pretty important card in the Allure combo. And you wouldn't really care about the Echo cost because when you're comboing out with Allure, you're gonna kill him, right? You're not gonna need another turn. And then of course we have Pouncing Jaguar. This card, again, another sweet Stompy card, and definitely 1 mana 2/2 with basically the only drawback of having to pay the Echo again. Pretty good, pretty sweet actually. A little, sometimes it can be a little slow, but it's a sweet card. Deranged Hermit, this is basically the first, more or less as far as I know, army in a can kind of thing that would be later referenced or whatever in Siege Game Commander. Of course, Siege Gang, not always better, sometimes worse, because this obviously Deranged Hermit puts more power into play, but Siege Game gives you a bunch of reach and stuff. Anyway, both cards are great. Deranged Hermit's a sweet card. Really, really fun. It makes squirrels, of course. This is how you can tell Morrow was heavily involved in this block. So it's an elf that makes squirrels. Elves are great, squirrels are great. Really, really cool. Do you pay the echo or not? That's a really interesting thing for this card, you know. Some of them you always want to play, like obviously Pountain Jaguar or Urza's Blueprints. Or, of course, our next card, Avalanche Riders. This was Darwin Castle's Invitational card. It's the first one that appeared, but All Raids card, Sylvan Safekeeper, which didn't come out till, was that Judgment, I believe? That was actually the first one to be made, but that didn't come out till later. Avalanche Riders was the next one and the first one to actually come out in a set. So anyways, 4 mana 2/2 haste, Stone Rains with Echo, so you can use it as like a 4 mana Stone Rain that shocks them, or you know, and then you can sometimes pay the cost, sometimes not, to keep the guy around or whatever. This is a really fun card, really great card. Definitely, again, skill testing card. Do you want to keep it around for the extra damage, or are you just gonna let it die and just play more LD or something? You know, what you do is definitely pretty interesting. Unfortunately, Echo is more of a spiky mechanic. Not a lot of real good chance of it coming back, but there were a lot of good Echo cards, like Karmic Guy, that's a really good one. That one, of course, was in the Flash Hulk decks. Of course, probably the best Echo card that sees the most play anywhere, maybe with the exception of Deranged Hermit, would be Mog War Marshal. Card is amazing. I mean, it just does everything. Does everything you'd want a goblin to do. So that card's great. So Echo definitely still went on to do some cool stuff when it later came back in Time Spiral. Rather thematically, of course, too. So lots of good stuff. Echo, definitely, once I started looking at the cards, there's definitely a lot of really good ones that I didn't even think about. Maybe not the most powerful ones, but definitely a lot of really cool stuff going on here. All right, and this is the other mechanic, not really named, but it's the you get some free shit mechanic. This one was uh, uh, very varied. Some of them, I mean, and even the same card. For example, Cloud of Fairies, sometimes insane, sometimes just good. You know, sometimes just a good role player. I played this card in a lot of decks where it was just a good card, like in Fish. Sometimes in the Heartbeat of Spring decks in Extended, it was a combo piece. So, yeah, definitely just sort of depends on where you're looking at. Rewind, that's a good one. This is one just recently reprinted in M21. This is a great card. I love Rewind. It's definitely one of those 4 mana counter spells, but it gives you upside, so you can cast your 4 mana spell or 3 mana spell or whatever at the end step too. So that's really great. Definitely get a lot of really cool value out of Rewind. You know, same thing with Snap. Snap is definitely a little bit on the stronger side, obviously, and it can sometimes combo. Well, oftentimes it comboed with Cloud of Fairies to return it to your hand to generate more mana, especially if you had something like a Sapphire Medallion to play, or like I said, a Heartbeat of Spring. Yeah, lots of crazy stuff going on there. And then of course we get to Treachery. I don't know what the fuck they were thinking with this card. Who the fuck thought this shit was fine? See, this is the thing with Urza's block. Like everything is like through the roof. Like mind control or persuasion or whatever. These are like 5 mana, right? Treachery's like 0 mana. I mean, how these kind of effects are just so insane. Like these stealing effects. This would feel like Treachery being followed up with anything would feel really bad. This is like Feldalkin Shackles level of brokenness, except it's easier to to make work, because all you need is 5 mana and 2 of it just has to be blue. Like, Treachery is busted. It's one of my favorite cards to play in Commander, of course. I love the art. I mean, look at that great Matthew Wilson art. Um, I mean, this card just is ridiculous. I what do you say, right? What do you say about Treachery? This is just a silly card to get in draft, and it's just a silly card just in general, with stuff like say Ancient Tomb or whatever. Just dumb that so it can produce mana. I mean, really, really, what in the world? Yeah. So Treachery's busted, and of course we talked a little bit about Great Whale and Palancron previously too, and I think that's basically all the free spells. I think there was only like 7. So, oh, of course, End Time Spiral. So that's another one. Whew. Yeah, free draw 7s. Who thought that would be busted with in a set with Tolarian Academy and City Traders and Ancient Tomb in the previous set? Nothing could go wrong, right? What's the worst that could happen? All right, so let's start looking at some of these notable cards. One of the funny things about this is it actually put cards into basically legal sets, legal formats like extended and standard at the time, because, for example, Wildfire was a card that was in Portal. I think it was it both Portals or just Portal 1, Portal 2, something like that? Anyways, it was a Portal card, but then they made it standard legal first, because I think the first Portal came out in 97, and then the next one came out in 99 or something like that. Anyways, trying to get the time right. It's too hard for my little brain. All I can do is think about goblins. Speaking of goblins, Goblin Matron, another card that was originally in Portal, I believe, and then printed into well, the normal stats. So, of course, as you can see, this has the incredible Dieter Lizzie. I mean, this whole thing, like, everything about this set, the biggest takeaway I can give you is that it really provides the bedrock for a number of different decks, really powerful decks. Even to this day, of course, Goblin Lackey and Goblin Matron are like the cornerstone of like the really big core, like say Lackey, Matron, Vile, Wasteland, and Port, or whatever, and then of course like some number of Ringleader and Pile Driver and da 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 da. But you're pretty much always playing 4 Lackey, 4 Matron, 4 Vile, and then of course some number of ports and wastelands. Typically 4 waste, some number of ports. So it's just, I mean, God, I don't know, like this entire set is like, what is with the mana like stuff? I mean, everything just cheats on mana. Everything produces a million mana. I mean, I didn't have like Priest of Titania in here. Like, how much mana has Priest of Titania produced since 1998? Like, this is insane. You know, like, if I made some sort of Faustian bargain for like infinite knowledge, I just want to see like how much mana has all these cards produced, because I'm pretty sure Goblin Lackey has currently outpaced Tolarian Academy, especially since it's been fucking banned and everything. Like, Lackey into Muxus into like 3 or 4 goblins. Like, how much mana is that? I think in just these last couple months, Lackey must have produced like thousands of free mana. Like, this thing is just completely like just an insane enabler. Like, how many free wins? I mean, and I think that's fine, in as much because like you have to build around it, right? Like, it's a build around card. You can't put Lackey into anything, obviously. You can't put Muxus into anything. It's not just some big stupid fatty to cheat out. You have to like put a bunch of goblins in your deck. But the payoff is insane, obviously. I think Muxus, if please, I'll forgive me or whatever, but it's basically fire done right, because it's obviously insane. Like, this card is just ridiculous, right? Like, it's I mean, how much mana has it produced? Just infinite kills. I mean, this thing makes like Primeval Titan look fair. Yeah, it's just ridiculous. Anyways, Lackey, Matron, printed in Saga. Just the cornerstone of the Goblins deck. Absolutely just insane. Matron lets you do toolbox stuff. Lackey gives you free wins, produces mana, sometimes just puts a War Chief into play, sets up your next couple turns so you can like play a dude waste, or just port him, or just ridiculous. Really great. Wildfire, of course, made its own deck too. We'll talk about that a little bit. And then Windfall, of course, again, this is part of the Academy decks. I mean, this thing was totally ridiculous. I mean, if you're killing someone on the first turn, you're going to be drawing 7 off it, regardless if you're dropping your hand, right? Because it's, each player discards his or her hand and draws cards equal to the greatest number a player discarded this way. So if you read it, it's like, oh, your opponent discarded 7. Well, I guess I draw 7. So it's basically Wheel of Fortune, but in blue. Yeah. Yep. I mean, why? Yep. Yep, Windfall. That's a card. Really good when you have infinite mana acceleration. And of course, perhaps, maybe, my favorite card in the set, Duress. This thing is one of the best anti-combo cards. Like, if you're in a format and you can main deck 4 Duress and it's really good, I think it's awesome. Like, I think that format's really good. Where Duress isn't like a blink most of the time, and you can feel good casting it against almost every deck. Obviously there are exceptions, of course. For example, Goblins doesn't play. I mean, unless you can snipe their Vial on the first turn. I mean, they don't really play any non-creatures. So, but Duress is great. It hoses the things that need to be hosed. These powerful, non-interactive, spell-based decks, especially since in older formats, these spell-based decks, like, they're still playing all these busted stuff, these busted spells that are still around, that are way better and above any creature you could play. Even, I mean, really, even stuff like, Oko, Uro, and things like that. So, yeah, or I guess Oko's not a creature, but you know what I mean. So, yeah, Duress. God, what a great card. What great art. What great, I mean, it's just perfect. Duress is definitely one of the best design cards, one of my favorite cards. I mean, top 10 best design cards, Duress, 100%. I love it. I really want to get a foil version. There's like a judge foil version, or no, I think it's an arena foil of this art and everything. It's foil, old border foil, beautiful. Love it. Definitely worth it. What a great card. What a great card. I mean, it's just so perfect. Everything about it is perfect. One of the best designed cards in the entire game, and it's kind of ironic it comes from the most combo heavy block of all time. There's so many gems buried in this block. So much good stuff. Even like once they got rid of all the broken combo stuff, like all these other good, fun, interesting, I mean, probably too powerful, right? Like compared to today, like there's, we're not going to be seeing like, Grid Monolith and the Voltaic Key into Phyrexian Processor, kind of stuff. But they created distinct, interesting, unique decks, even though they're, the power level is probably a little bit higher than we'd want today. See, if they were all just like stupid mid-range creatures that made the deck play itself, then yeah, they'd print them. But anyways, let's move on. Mm-hmm. Gosh, that's good stuff. I got my mint, my mint drinky, my mint drinky. This is great. I'm having a good time. All right, talking about foundations of decks. Can you fucking believe this shit? I mean, this is show and tell and sneak attack. I mean, I guess, if the best thing you can put into play is like a Verdant Force, or maybe Nicol Bolas or something. I mean, yeah, this is just totally silly, totally freaking silly. I mean, these are obviously have been the basis of decks. I mean, at least in Legacy, like really good decks. Um, since Innistrad, obviously. Well, before that, really, when you had, Rise of the Eldrazi, you had Emrakul, of course, and all of his good buddies. And then, of course, when Gristlebrand was printed, it made the deck even better. Very simple, very brainless, but undeniably super, super powerful. Um, yeah, I mean, how are these in like the same set? I mean, like these cards are both really fun, and like show and tell can obviously be sometimes much more symmetrical than its pilots would like to think, but we aren't going to tell them that. We'll just be happy with them casting show and tell. And of course, sneak attack is very good too. These are sneak attack specifically, I know has always been a really popular casual card. Um, I've always liked it. I mean, look at these goblins. They're trying to sneak up on this dragon. So yeah, these, again, more cheating shit, more mana, like, cost circumvention, like, alright. Next up we have, of course, one of my favorite cards, Smokestack. This thing is great. This is super fun. I love playing stacks back in the day when you actually had Smokestack in the deck and you were like a prison deck. You're just like, oh man, turn one, like, land, or shop Mox or shop Soul Ring into Smokestack, into like Waste or Strip Mine, into just, I mean, anything. It was so good. And like I love just like the being able to answer anything, just like bone crushing, soul grinding, like inevitability. It was just awesome. And it was slow. It was like this creeping death where you just slowly close the vice or whatever. Super fun. I love it. Great art. Not reserved list, which is nice for some reason. Like I said, it's totally random, but definitely not a card they would print today. I guess they don't like this kind of stuff anymore. And then, of course, we have Sarah's Sanctum and Gaia's Cradle. Sanctum specifically goes in Enchantress style decks, and then Cradle, of course, basically in Just Elves, although Maverick also likes to knight up neither Reliquary, up a Cradle. It's pretty good. So, yeah, definitely very sweet, very I mean, Cradle, again, also super busted, but at least, like, green does mana acceleration, this is at least on color. And Sarah's Sanctum, I mean, like, enchantments are even harder to get into play than creatures, unless they printed 0 mana enchantments, maybe the enchantment land things. I don't really know, but I would actually like to see enchantment lands. I think that'd be kind of sweet. Enchantments are just a little bit harder to abuse regardless, but anyways, I guess that's neither here nor there. Sarah's Sanctum, yeah, pretty sweet, pretty powerful, does tons of stuff. Cradle, definitely insanely busted, probably one of the most, probably top 10 most powerful card in Legacy, by far. Yeah, this thing is pretty crazy, pretty crazy. Alright, now we're going to be looking at some creatures. Goblin Cadets, this card was great in Vintage back in the day. Vintage was very, very creature light for a very long time. Really, it's only up until somewhat recently with like some of the tempo style decks, like the Mentor style decks, and then Mentor Delver style decks, and then also the shop decks playing like Ravager and a bunch of different artifact guys, especially since like Kaladesh block. But before that, really pretty creature light. So Cadets was really good in the slide deck. So you just play like a bunch of, Jackalbops, Mog Fanatic, Goblin Cadets, that kind of stuff. Just mono 1-drop guys. Grimlock Mancer, of course. Cadets, another 1-mana 2/1, no drawback. It was great. Very, very great. I love this card. I mean, it's just silly. The flavor text, again, totally silly. Yeah, I mean, of course, this, again, more or less goes for Goblin Patrol 2, 1-mana 2/1, but it has the Echo over red. This is sometimes played. Patrol I consider playing like in a more, like the land destruction sort of style decks, which seems like maybe counterintuitive because it's more mana intensive, but you really, land destruction, to create those time walks, you need actual creatures in play to give you that consistent damage to really take advantage of it. And so Patrol is good there. But anyways, Cadets is good. Again, another good weenie guy. Welder, of course, this thing was pretty good at the time. but it really it was shiny. Well, it was really good in the Stacks decks, Welder Mud, back in the day, because, well, welding out moxes for stuff that's countered or destroyed or got hit by a rack and ruin or whatever, that's pretty good. Pretty good. And then, of course, when you had stuff in the graveyard and in play, you could um, weld stuff out to avoid artifact destruction. Pretty sweet. And then, of course, we got Processor. Again, this is a big part of the Tinker decks or other style of decks. Pay a bunch of mana, put a token into play. Big, big guy. This thing was great to turbo out against the control decks, just because, I mean, obviously they couldn't really do too much against it, or just really anything. Pay 6, 7 life, that was about the average amount, and then just start smashing 7/7s every turn. And then, of course, very good with Voltaic Key, too. And then, of course, we got, I know this sounds crazy, but some of the best creatures ever printed, or at least 22 years ago, Morphling and Masticore. Morphling was great because, especially at this time, a lot of decks you still had access to Force of Will, so you could play it on turn 5, counter their whatever, and then untap, and you can, prevent it from dying. And of course, with the damage on the stack stuff, with 6th edition that would come out during Urza's block, that made it even better. And then, of course, it's basically 5-turn clock, basically unkillable, and anything that could screw it over, you could just counter it, So, yeah, very good. Masticore, this card saw a lot more play because decks that play Gaia's Cradle really love to play Masticore, like any of the green decks, because this was a great way to win the mirror, just turn all your mana into just a bunch of just damage, right, and wipe their board. Very sweet. It was hard to kill, right? So it had regenerate. Yeah, it was good, and a lot of times you could excuse me again, the drawback, sometimes you played Squee or whatever, or you just get core locked, but it wouldn't matter because you could just kill everything and it'd be sweet. It wouldn't, no biggie, But these were also heavily buffed by the presence of all this mana acceleration, and we'll look at those decks in a half a minute. Look at the decks that really were propping up these cards. So, very cool stuff. All right, gonna take another drink. Very good. It's been like an hour of awesomeness, and we aren't even done. Look, Phyrexian Processor is so sweet. I put it on here twice. Why did I put it on here twice? I don't know. Oh well, no biggie. Okay, well, Processor is so good, I must have untapped it with Voltaic Key. I think I probably meant to put Voltaic Key there. Ah well. Anyways, let's start with Metalworker. This thing is super sweet. When it lives after you play it, awesome. Of course, it's a artifact creature, so it's the most vulnerable permanent. So yeah, this thing is not long for this world. You could actually measure the amount of time it's in play, and its half-life is actually measured in milliseconds. So, but that's okay. It was actually a lot better when Mirrodin came around, when you could put your fucking lightning greaves on this guy, turn 1 tomb, turn 1 tomb greaves, turn 2 metalworker, greaves up your metalworker, and then just dump a bunch of mana. Oh, that was good shit. Yeah, think about it. There was a time when you actually played lightning greaves in your extended decks, and it was fucking good. Yeah, if you can believe it. Well, lightning greaves also pretty good with Goblin Welder, who we just saw. But yeah, Metalworker, this is great in a lot of the mud decks also played it in Vintage. Obviously castable really easily off a shop. So yeah, and there was obviously less creature removal in Vintage at the time. So next up, of course, Grim Monolith, another really powerful card. This is fixed Mana Vault, sort of fixed. And yeah, this thing is great. Again, another big player and producing a shitload of mana. Tinker, of course, this thing got you your Phyrexian Processor, or sometimes your Phyrexian Colossus. Colossus, which is, of course, very good with Voltaic Key, giving it basically pseudo-vigilance. Pretty great, pretty great. Tinker is one of the most busted cards ever. This thing is, so this does the, I mean, how the fuck is this even real? How is this even a real card? Like, look how good Natural Order is, even if you're just getting like a fucking Verdant Force, right? That was like really good for a long time. Like, that's awesome. And now this is like less mana. It's in a better color, um, less colored mana. I mean, and just any artifact. And artifacts do so many ridiculous things. Artifact creatures like Colossus, like 2 or 3 turn clock, depending on how much life they've lost. It's basically unblockable because it has Mega Menace, processors, just insane. It gave these decks like card selection. I don't know. And this was only, I mean, of course, the really broken use for it was to get Jar, right? Without Jar, like the cards that it gets aren't that great. I mean, obviously it's still really good, but it's only until Mirrodin, of course. If you saw my previous video about Mirrodin is nuts, of course, uh, about talking about Tinker and its effect and extended with when we combined Saga and then of course Mirrodin block, and it was just insane, completely insane. This is not a reasonable card. Like, it's just how is this even? Well, at least it has a cute picture of Joyra on it. She's a cutie. All right. Okay, let's look at some more stuff. Some green cards. So we got Rancor. Remember, this is enchantment block. Rancor, this card is sweet. This was misprinted. I think this is actually supposed to be 3 mana, a green and 2 colorless. Um, but I think they saw the way that it played as like a 1 mana enchantment. They're like, yeah, this is great. Again, this is a big part of why the Stompy decks are so good. Rancors just takes them to fucking funky town. I mean, and of course it gives them pseudo evasion, where it lets you push through a bunch of damage. So of course this is great with stuff like giant growth and so on. And it's great on a River Boa because River Boa has regenerate, and so like if they can block it, you just smash them for a bajillion damage, regenerating, maybe giant growthing to push the damage through. I mean, so good. Rancor is awesome. One of my favorite cards. Definitely my favorite card in Stompy. So good. Treetop Village, this thing is played all over the place. Great and extended at the time when it was played. Just pushes through a bunch of damage. Coming to play tap kinda sucks, but it's not a big deal. You're perfectly fine playing on this on turn 5 or 6 or whatever, um, and then just attacking with it late game. It was a great, just a great way to get extra value out of your lands. Crop Rotation, another 1 mana busted tutor. What it does today is it fetches up Field of the Dead or Dark Depths in Legacy. I mean, this thing is just not reasonable. This is silly, and it feels so bad. You like go to Wasteland, they're non-basic, and then they crop rotation in response, and you just feel like you're just gonna lose, because then they're gonna get like Tabernacle or something dumb, Caracas or whatever. Yeah, crop rotation dumb. Gamble is in this set too, but that's another good card in lands. Gets light from alone a lot of the time. 1 mana tutor. Okay, so yeah. Anyway, at least Gamble is like balanced in some respect. Crop rotation, not so much. Then we got Mother of Runes. Again, probably one of the best white cards ever printed. At least creatures, so Mother of Runes or Stoneforge or Thalia, they're all really important and work really great together, and they wouldn't be as good without each other. But yeah, I love Mother of Runes. Really good stuff there. Another old lady, we got Academy Rector. This thing just fetches up all sorts of busted shit. Mostly bargain. Or sometimes other stuff. Omniscience is a good one too. All sorts of stupid shit. And these are just not fair cards. Yeah. Okay. Replenish. This is really good in enchantment based decks. It's like Living Death, except it's cheaper and doesn't have as much colored mana in it. Okay. Powder Keg was really good at the time. This was one of the premier sweepers because especially weenie decks were just, One full of 1 mana, 2 mana guys, so Keg was a great preemptive answer to them to stem the bleeding. Really good, really good. Um, then we got Plowender. Plowender is pretty sweet. This was played a lot in a lot of green decks, especially they could produce a million mana with like Priest of Titania or, of course, Gaia's Cradle. Plowender was very miserable to play against, and they brought it back in 8th edition for some reason, so I could have fun. And then we got Donate. This is even the shit cards are busted in this stupid fucking thing. This is probably quote unquote the worst card in the Illusions of Grandeur Donate decks. Well, I guess Illusions is pretty bad too, but you put them together and you win the game, so are they bad, right? Like, the whole synergy thing is pretty important, so yeah, Donate was, well, it made that combo deck. And so yeah, 99 2000, then we have Illusion Donate, and in Extended, and that was insane. Speaking of combo decks, we have Bargain. Yeah. So it's like, oh, this card seems balanced. It's 6 mana. Oh, wait, you can actually cheat it out with Academy Rector, which they did a lot in Vintage when Cabal Therapy was printed. You could therapy away their swords or force or whatever, and then sack the Rector, and then go nuts with Bargain. Yeah, there's a bunch of ways to tutor it and cheat into play. I mean, there was show and tell in Saga. Dark Ritual was in this set. Uh, okay, okay. Like, I mean, the card is arguably kind of okay now because it's like kind of a side grade to something like Gristlebrand, but I mean, it's only kind of a side grade because, like, obviously, Gristlebrand like gets shit on by Caracas, and then sometimes like if they have a board presence and they swords it, like, do you draw? I mean, there's a lot of like situations where it's not that good. Um, so Yawgmoth's Bargain is just a stupid card. So, and it may or may not be okay to unban now, but hey, who knows? Yeah, this is I mean, this is the parade of brokenness and stuff. I mean, just every card in the set is just so good, so good. Okay, so let's talk about. I mean, there's a bunch of different decks. So we got Stompy, mono green Stompy. So just played like stuff like uh, uh, Wild Dogs and of course Pouncing Jaguar, Albino Troll, all sorts of crap like that. And then of course Rancor, Giant Growth, stuff like that. Um, we've got Wildfire, again, mono red artifact deck. Accelerated Blue. This is basically just mono blue, but it's jamming its Masticores and Treacheries and Morphlings off of Grim Monolith and Ancient Tomb and stuff. Totally fair. That's totally fair. That's what blue decks should be doing. They should be producing a million fucking mana. I mean, they put Tolarian Academy in this set, so that's what you do. The Replenish decks, of course, they were blue-white. Dumped a bunch of shit. Replenished back Opalescence and double Opalescence and a bunch of stuff. The Tinker decks played Tinker and Artifacts. They were really fun to play against too, because you could Mishra's Helix and lock all their artifacts or their mana down, which is fun. Napster, which was this fucking insane like mono black like mid-range control thing that played like Vampiric Tutor and Yawgmoth's Will and a bunch of ridiculous one-ohs like Vicious Hunger and just that was crazy. Trinity Green, which is just the mono green LD thing. Plowender, of course, Deranged Hermit, tons of good stuff. Played Blastoderm and stuff like that too. There's like Thieving Magpie based decks, the typical sort of Drago kind of thing. The red green Hermit, Deranged Hermit decks, featuring, of course, one of my favorite cards, Arc Lightning. Good stuff like Pillage. It's kind of like a Ponza style thing. And then, of course, mono red Ponza itself with Avalanche Riders and all that good stuff. That was sweet. That was a sweet deck. But probably the most interesting one, and one I remember people talking about a lot when I first started playing Magic, was this White Lightning thing. I didn't understand the difference. It took me a long time. It took me until like Kiki Jiki came out, and I figured it out. It finally just like, bam, I get it. So Waylay was you put three 2/2 night white knight tokens onto the battlefield, and you exile them at end of turn. And this is a white and 2 colors, and it's an instant. As you can see, it's cards up on the screen. But if you know, this is just the templating was wrong, because it's a trigger at end of turn. So you can cast this at the end of your opponent's turn, because the trigger for it already happened. Then you can untap with it, and then you could drop like a Crusade, a Glorious Anthem or something, and it smash for a bunch of damage. Like, this is totally crazy, because this is like completely like orthogonal to how these typical like mono white weenie decks played, and very appropriately called White Lightning. And so this deck won actually U.S. Nationals in 1999. I don't think they have Nationals anymore. They got rid of that for some reason. I love the states, regionals, nationals, worlds. It made sense, but oh well, I guess. I mean, whatever. Why have cool stuff? Let's just name everything Mythic now, so you don't know what's going on. And organized play is still a mess. But let's calm down. Let's not talk about how organized play is confusing, and even I don't understand it anymore. So I'm just gonna drink some more of my tea, which is very delicious. Tastes like tea. Okay. So this deck was pretty sweet. Typical white weenie. Played some Soltari guys, the shadow dudes that were hard to block. Mother of Runes, of course, protector dudes. Really great stuff. Longbow archers, pretty good. All sorts of great stuff. Yeah, this deck was really sweet. It definitely, like, think like turn 3, you end a turn, Waylay, turn 4, drop a plains, double Crusade. So now all your dudes are 4/4s, and you smash for like 12. I mean, and that's if you like don't have anything out. Like if you have like played like a 1 or 2 guys before that. I mean, that's so much damage. You can you might even be able to kill them that turn. 16 if you played two, yeah, something like that. Anyways, really great. I love it. I mean, this thing is awesome. This is one of the coolest decks, and so this is the one I wanted to highlight. Anyways, they eventually errated this thing too. I don't know why. I think this card might actually work the way it's supposed to when they removed all the power level errata in 2006 or 7. So yeah. Oh, that was also when they fixed Time Vault 2, finally, again, I think. So yeah, this deck was sweet. This is really sweet. Okay, so what can we end up taking from all of this? Well, I think fairly obviously there's too much stuff, just gives you too much free mana. It didn't really matter where it came from. All these cards are just ridiculous. Like, obviously, even the tamest one, obviously Goblin Lackey, still ate a ban in an extended, and that was well, and that was even before like Pro Tour New Orleans in 2003, which then also got Recruiter restricted or banned, excuse me, because the food chain Goblins combo. I mean, everything just, I mean, Frantic Search produced mana, basically, or free at the worst. Obviously, Academy, Sanctum, Cradle. I mean, all these busted ban cards, all of them almost, I mean, Time Spiral produced too much mana. Tinker produced mana. I mean, all of these things. Too much mana acceleration. It's just, that was probably the biggest thing. Replenish basically produces mana, putting in like probably like, you know, all these 3 and 4 mana enchantments. Definitely cheating on mana cost there, because attunement let you draw a bunch and then discard a bunch, draw, discard a bunch. Just too much. In addition to that, in 5th edition, get this. At least Necropotence I kind of understand, because like all the Necro decks at the time were like very untuned. They were just like 3-color decks with some dual lands and some beaters, and like, yeah, they're really great, but they weren't like super dominant. Well, okay, there was Black Summer, but like it's not really what we would think of as being like super bad. Um, and if Manivault though, that one is, I don't understand how Manivault, I mean, that's basically a colorless dark ritual, except it has synergy with all of your artifact stuff. So Tinker, Academy, etc. Even something like Mind Over Matter. Yeah, it's stupid. So that was still in 5th edition. So you have access to that. And then in 6th edition, when that came out, it had all the tutors from Mirage blocks. So Enlightened, Mystical, and Vampiric. Worldly too, I guess, if that mattered. But yeah, just, and of course Dark Ritual. Dark Ritual still. I mean, the last block Ritual is Mass block. So yeah, at this time they're probably like, okay, this is too much. Dark Ritual is just that was like the big thing of how people played and how cards were designed, was always designed around Dark Ritual up until about 2000, really. And so that's why you have stuff like Hypnotic Spectre, Phyrexian Negator, Necro being triple black, these three mana cost black cards. Yeah, just totally insane. Um, so yeah, some weird reason they reprinted all these ridiculous things. Um, and then of course again, Mark Rosewar talks about this, just trying to like make these old, confusing, wonky cards just more elegant, which is obviously like, good. Like for example, Diabolic Tutor is just basically 2 demonic tutors stapled together with a sweet snake on the art. I mean, that's freaking based. That's a good design because 4 mana is balanced. Or Grim's even more balanced, a little more pushed, right? You can ritual it out, of course, but it's 3 and then 3 life. So you can do these things basically balance, but like some things you can't really balance, like something that produces more mana than it costs. Grim Monolith, sure, it's a cheaper, cleaner than Mana Vault, but Grim Monolith also has all the power artifact bullshit, so it's easier to combo with. And of course, like even more recently with the companion shit, we had Monolith in the Zerda decks, which was probably even just as bad, if not worse, than the Lurrus stuff. That was just, oh yeah, I got my combo enabler in the command zone. I mean, my companion. Yeah, that's good. That's what we should have in regular Magic. Anyways, Grim Monolith has been the heart of all sorts of ridiculous things. Not even talking about its obvious synergy with Voltaic Key. Again, bargain. Yeah, all that extra text on Necro was there for a reason. So once it's in play, it's just, I mean, you basically win the game right there. So bargain, too much. Again, same thing with Transmute and Tinker. Transmute Artifact, I should say, and Tinker. Like, yeah, it was there for a reason. So, not good. I think Reshape Artifact was like that was like the fixed Tinker slash Transmute Artifact. That's a pretty elegant design, but anyways, yeah, these trying to do cool things, and just like some designs are going to be inherently busted regardless. Again, Monolith and Bargain are the best example of this. These repeated card drawing engines, unless you put a lot of hefty costs on them, like Greed, from Legends, where it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So too much. And again, to compound it again, we have all these confluence events conspiring to really screw over everything. R&D, there was very little of it. For example, Urza's Destiny, Morrow was the only designer. So that was like the first set since Arabian Nights, and I can't imagine they'll ever do this again. And really also, of course, this was a very incomplete understanding of, the philosophy, the theory, and then just the mechanics and everything of what goes into Magic. I mean, not too long ago, at this time in '98, we still have like the stuff about Sly, For example, like the mana curve and tempo. Tempo was, I think, like, was that Alan Comer in like 97 with the Turbo Xerox? So this is like a year before that. And so like these ideas and strategies and stuff are still really being developed. And since of course R&D works, in advance, I mean, they don't really have all a good grasp on these things. Even today, I guess you could say. So that of course was also a big problem. So yeah, all these sort of things really came together, and you know, and especially just the game itself was just too young. I mean, they still really aren't sure what to do, what's going on, what kind of things people want to play. So you aren't really sure what the appetite is. You have the story you want to tell and these cards you want to make, and you're just making them because you think they're cool or whatever. So everything's still pretty off the cuff, flying by the seat of your pants. Um, and it almost killed the game. It was very bad. The whole like R&D game pulled up into the Hasbro or Wizards or whatever, and being yelled at and saying, if you fuck up again like this, you're out of a job. Who knows if that threat is still in force? Obviously not. But yeah, pretty crazy. I mean, once you did get rid of it, it took like a year, but once you did get rid of all the stupid shit, um, it was really fun. Like, I think the Tempest Saga block was really fun. In the standard, there's a lot of really cool decks, and then Saga and Mass block was also really good, especially with like a lot of the Mass stuff slowing things down. I think that was pretty sweet. Um, and I think there's so many good cards that I think it was obviously Urza's block was a mistake at the time. All those things were really bad, and if it went another way, it could have killed the game. But now I think it's very invaluable because so many of the cards are the basis of so many powerful decks that without it, we wouldn't even everything would look so much different. So it adds a lot. I think it does add a lot, at least now, after a little bit more power creep, maybe a little bit of more cards that are able to answer a lot of these styles of things, and of course certain design. We're not producing any more busted mana stuff. Like, there's no more easy ramp. Like, we're not doing that anymore, right? That's it's just, I mean, it's obviously just too good. It's just too much. Like, you'll have stuff like Eye of Ugin and things like that, but extremely limited kind of ramp stuff, or Eldrazi Temple, right? Like, just for Eldrazi. Um, Even the rituals, we don't even really get good ones anymore. Like, nothing better than Seething Song, and Seething Song's really not that. I mean, obviously compared to Dark Ritual, right? Or even something like Rite of Flame, it's a lot worse. So yeah. So also, this is really the last time, the end of an interesting trend, and the beginning of Mirage Block is really when we start getting like, this is when you'll find that we start getting a lot of creatures that are actually good, like good aggressive weenies. So and really all the colors, even I guess blue doesn't really get quote unquote aggressive ones or good ones really, but um, white, red, green, and black get a lot of really powerful weenie cards. So that's pretty interesting. So at the end of Urza's Destiny, we don't really see any more of these. For whatever reason, I don't know exactly why they stopped making really good ones, or really pushing that kind of style of deck really hard. I mean, like, think like Wild Dogs and Pouncing Jaguar in the same set. Stuff like Rogue Elephant and, like I said, River Boa 2, all the shadow creatures in white and black. Obviously, Jackalpup, Mog Fanatic, and Tempest Block. So, for whatever reason, at the end of Saga Block, no more of these really push weenie things. I mean, at least a lot of them, I should say. Of course, we still get, for example, Nantuko Shade and Grim Lavamancer and Torment, and some other, decent weenies and stuff after that. But it's like, it's less like of a hyper focus from design. And really after this, the color hoses start getting really toned down. by a lot. Obviously, no more carpet flowers, no more composts, none of that kind of silly stuff. I mean, for example, in seventh edition and eighth edition, we have some hosers like, for example, like Choke in eighth edition and seventh edition, we have Boil and a few other hosers, but it's much less than like the tons and tons of ridiculous hosers we get. Basically, Submerge and Massacre are the only really powerful ones in Mass Block. And again, I talked a little bit about that in my Mercadian Masks is Nuts video. So yeah. And of course, like I mentioned, no more really ridiculous ramp. This is obviously too much. I mean, like everything ramped, like every other card ramped. If you sneeze, you produce 20 mana. So that was just too much. No more of that. I mean, even, again, something we didn't talk about, Thran Dynamo or Worn Power Stone. These were ramp cards. These were very good. Maybe Dynamo probably more than Power Stone, but too much. Just too much mana ramp. So they're very careful about that these days. Yeah, so that was a big problem. Well, okay, so they're careful about non-blue-green ramp, right? We still got Growth Spiral and Uro in some formats. I guess Uro in every format for the time being. By the time you hear this, maybe he's banned. Not sure. Yeah, so some busted ramp they're not doing anymore. Anyways, also during this time, Urza's Legacy, the first time we have foils. And then the end of the reserve list is Urza's Destiny. So there's actually reserve list foils. So if you look at the foil price for some cards, say Grim Monolith, oh boy, yeah, good, yikes, yeah, just really crazy. And thankfully they did get not add more to the reserve list, after this. So that's some small, well, it's good, right? We don't want what if they put like Rishadan Port on the reserve list? Oh man, that thing would be so expensive. Yikes. Anyways, no more reserve list, beginning of foils. Foils, of course, are cool. People like them a lot. I think it's like at 1 in 100, I think is the first like foil appearance in packs. So they're very rare actually. And then of course at this time again we start to see a little bit of the shift. Start to see better creatures. Creatures start to go up. Obviously all the spells are fucking insane still in this block specifically too. But even still into like Mass and Invasion, we still see a lot of really powerful spells. A lot of them blue, of course, because shit, why not? And then we start to see toned down a little bit, and like, well, maybe not Onslaught where we have all the storm stuff, but somewhere around there. Start going down. 8th edition, of course, has no counterspell, no memory lapse. So, yeah. So things are changing. Things are changing. So we do see better, non-embarrassing creatures. Flesh Reaver is pretty sweet. I like it a lot. That card did some good stuff in Suicide Black. Obviously, it was really bad against other aggro decks, but what you gonna do? It was great with him and Sinkhole, which bought you a bunch of turns, and so you could Flesh Reaver someone out pretty easily. So yeah, definitely things are changing. Everything is just going crazy because all the combo winter and everything else from Saga block for about a year. So that's not good, but there's a lot of different stuff going on under the hood, a lot of different powerful spells, I mean, this block is just chock full of really great stuff. So that's basically it. Whew, that's so much. That's so much stuff. I'm gonna drink some more tea. That's right. Mm-hmm. Ugh, gosh. I mean, I could have gone on for like talked about some of the decks. There's a lot of really good decks, a lot of interesting decks, but like it's an hour and a half now. I think that's about as much as I can do. I am going to go through at some point and talk about the Jar and Academy decks. Maybe the bargain decks. Yeah, I'd have to look at them. Some of the iterations of the bargain decks, the black white one, I think it was Saber Bargain. wasn't that ridiculous. It was just a good deck. It's not sort of like a Heartbeat of Spring tier, I'd say. But yeah, so Jarn Academy we'll definitely have to do. Yeah, that'll be interesting. So whew, yeah, yeah. I feel like I missed so much. There's so much to go through. There's so much good cards. I mean, I didn't even hit all of them. I didn't even talk about Rafellos or yeah, there's a bunch of good elves, all sorts of stuff. Anyways, so that's it, guys. That's all I got time for today. So thanks for stopping by. Thanks for hanging out with me, and have a great day.